following is a production of Cary TV, the Town of Cary's government access channel.
We will call to order the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Board for February 20th. We'll begin with adopting the agenda. Does anyone have any amendments, changes, or anything like that to the agenda? If not, I would entertain a motion to adopt.
So
A second, please.
Second.
All those in favor of adopting an agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, say no. That motion carries unanimously. We had no work session for which the minutes should be reviewed, so we only have the minutes of our regular meeting from January 30th. Once again, if anyone has any suggestions, edits, or comments on the minutes, would you speak up? Otherwise, I would look for a motion to approve those minutes as well.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of January 30th, 2017.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Would all those in favor say aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, say no, please. That motion also carries unanimously. We will move to our cases with a public hearing. And before we begin, even though we only have a few folks here, there may be some folks coming up to speak, so I'll go through the procedures very quickly. With the public hearing, we'll have our case brought forward by the member of the town staff. After the town staff person is done addressing the case, we will then open the public hearing. The first person who will speak on that public hearing will be the applicant. The applicant will have 10 minutes to present their side to us as well. After that, we will open the public hearing to all of you in the audience. If you'd be kind enough to come down that left side there when you come to speak, and there's some cards that have some information about you that we'd like you to fill out and hand that to the clerk. And the clerk will take that information and then get you situated at the podium to your left, which is the one without the computer monitor. The reason we'd like you to be at that podium is because it's the one with the timer on it. And we have a timer that gives you 5 minutes to speak on the case. You will have a green light for 4 minutes and 30 seconds of that period. For the final 30 seconds, you'll have a yellow light, and then when that light flashes red, your 5 minutes are exhausted, at which point I'll ask you to wrap up pretty quickly. And I'll do that because I want everyone to have the same 5-minute opportunity. We'll ask you to be concise, of course. I don't see a lot of folks in succession here, so selecting a spokesperson and stuff doesn't seem like it will apply for this evening. The one thing I will point out, though, is it's not a conversation between us and you. It is your chance to speak to us. We will not answer any questions or engage in any kind of interplay back and forth. We'll just listen. And then when you're done, you just go back by any means necessary up into your seat, and we'll just finish that up. Once we're done with the public hearing, I'll close it, and then we'll talk about the case. For those without the public hearing, we'll just go directly from the speaker, from the staff, directly into deliberating. So if I haven't missed anything, we will begin with our first case, 16 REZ 30. Ms. Bierman, good evening.
Good evening. This is a request to rezone about a little over 3.5 acres at the southeast quadrant of US 1 and Southeast Cary Parkway. This is a vicinity map. You can see Southeast Cary Parkway here. The site is about 300 feet to the north It's also adjacent to Morrow Durrell Park and just south of the transmission line easement. And this is an aerial view of the property. It's currently wooded, and you can see it in relation to the power line, the greenway, and the park. The existing zoning on this site is, for the most part, general commercial conditional use, with a small portion of the site in the R40 district, and also the site is in the mixed-use overlay district of the Wellington Park area. This request does involve a portion of 2 different lots. A subdivision plan is currently in review that will create the boundary in yellow that you see here in this request, along with several other lots. That subdivision will also include a public street from Cary Parkway, a cul-de-sac that will come through this area to provide access. The current zoning on the GCCU portion of the site was established in 1987, and the key components of those conditions relate to the land uses that are allowed. There are a number of commercial land uses, very specific uses that are included in this list that are allowed by the current zoning. Also, as I mentioned, there is, in addition to this rezoning request, there's a subdivision plan and 2 development plans that are in review for the general commercial parcel here. This shows the lot that would be created that's the subject of this rezoning request. Lot B of this subdivision in process would be for a sheets development, which is a plan that's currently, I believe, at the sketch plan review, but it's has been submitted to begin a review process. And also an Aldi site plan is in review for Lot C, and nothing has been submitted at this point for the 4th lot. The proposed zoning for this site is industrial conditional use and also removal of the mixed-use overlay district. The proposed zoning conditions include limiting land use to mini storage, outdoor storage, and accessory uses for those uses. And this is the reason why the request includes removal of the mixed-use overlay district, because that overlay does not allow mini storage. Since when this went to public hearing initially, the only zoning condition was the first that you see, limiting the land use. Since then, the applicant has added additional zoning conditions that you see in numbers 2 through 6. So that's why this is a public hearing this evening, because we have these additional conditions. Those include limiting the floor area to 120,000 square feet, a minimum of 85% of the floor area would be located within a fully enclosed building that would have access internally to the individual storage units. The maximum building height would be 45 feet. The operating hours would be between 6 a.m. and midnight, and any fencing for any outdoor areas that may be included would be black, and if visible from a public right-of-way, constructed of aluminum or wrought iron. This shows the growth framework map from the Cary Community Plan, and the site is designated as Business Industrial Park. There are several key policies from the Cary Community Plan that are applicable to the site. Work Policy 11 is one of those, and it the goal of that policy is to preserve and provide employment sites in traditional office parks. This site is part of a 42-acre area located at that southeast quadrant of the interchange with US 1. And this larger area is one of only 10 developable sites that are larger than 20 acres throughout town that could potentially be suitable for prime office area for economic development. However, another factor that comes into play with that, as I mentioned, is the fact that there is a substantial area of that 19 acres that is currently in the general commercial district and is already has a development subdivision plan and development plans that are in play working with the current zoning. There are also a couple of policies from the SHAPE chapter that we think apply particularly here. SHAPE chapter policy 6 speaks to appropriate transitions between uses. Here you can see a transition provided by the rather expansive floodplain that you can see in green. The Mara Durrell Park adjacent and the floodplain, and that provides transitions from the residential uses that are to the northeast. Also, SHAPE Policy 7 speaks to providing opportunities for a limited set of non-residential uses outside of regular commercial centers, and we think this would be supports having miscellaneous uses along roadway corridors that would be buffered from residential neighborhoods or other low-intensity uses, and we feel like the mini storage is one of those miscellaneous types of uses that are requested from time to time. This just shows the stream buffer and floodplain network in the area. The Parks, Recreation, Cultural Resources Facilities Master Plan includes the greenway through the area that you can see constructed adjacent to the site, and also the Marla Durrell Park. And this is just, again, a closer view of that to see the site in relation to the park. The greenway is about roughly about 200 feet or so from the property line for the site. It's even farther to the developed portion of the park. And where the greenway comes to the north, this distance is roughly 80 feet where it comes to that closest point. This shows Cary Parkway, of course, is a major thoroughfare. It's 4-lane, median divided. As I mentioned, there would be a cul-de-sac created to access this lot, and also as part of that, the review to this point for the subdivision plan there would include a deceleration lane to access this, leading up to the cul-de-sac that would come off of Cary Parkway. There is a future Go Cary route proposed for Southeast Cary Parkway in this area. There were 8 area residents in attendance at the neighborhood meeting, and there were questions on a number of topics, including access and road improvements, several issues related to building design, height and design, the hours of operation, security, signage, tax or impact on the values of adjacent homes, and questions regarding parking. We also received an email from a citizen that had some concern with proximity to the park and greenway, and also a phone call from another citizen that just had general concerns with traffic and access. There were no speakers at the public hearing. So that concludes my comments. Following the applicant's comments and the public hearing, staff will be available for questions.
Thank you. We'll now open the public hearing, and first person we'll hear from is the applicant.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Jason Barron with Morningstar Law Group. Mary's done a great job of outlining the case and the nature of the request before you. I'm going to try to hit a couple of points that I think are important in terms of the overall context. The one that shows the zoning with the proposed subdivision. This one, 7. This is an interesting case. I typically manage to find my way into interesting cases, and this certainly fits that description. This is a case that, from a current situation standpoint, it's greenfield. It's a vacant parcel. I mean, I guess technically you can consider it infill because it's got other uses around it, but most of those uses are roads. But it's currently unimproved. So the typical process we would apply in situations like this is you would look at it and say, okay, what's around it, and then what does the land use plan suggest for this area? And the land use plan, as Mary talked about, while there are some policies, some that are consistent with our proposal and some that are inconsistent with our proposal, the overall land use plan suggests business industrial park on this site, which I would concede a self-storage facility is not furthering the interests of a business/industrial park on this site. However, what the recently adopted plan really ignores is the fact, as Mary pointed out, that a large portion of this site is already zoned general commercial conditional use, and that there are 2 plans that are already in review, and those are uses that are permitted as a matter of right. And so as long as those site plans dot their I's and cross their T's and satisfy the buffers and setbacks and height requirements, those plans we can expect will be approved. And so while from a timing standpoint, what we're looking at right now seems to locate a use in an area that is otherwise not improved, that situation will be changing, and changing pretty quickly, I would anticipate. Within the next year or so, I imagine there will be development activity on this site. And so it is an unusual situation, and the incongruity, to the extent that what we are requesting is incongruous with the overall land use plan classification for the site, it's really built around the fact that the land use plan classification is inconsistent with the existing zoning. It is the existing zoning that is kind of creating the situation where when you apply the land use plan lens to what we're talking about, it really kind of blurs what is actually going on, because what is actually going on is, is a retail development or a convenience store with a grocery store next to it, and then another future lot being created for development. And so from the owner's perspective, and there's one developer who you'll hear from, I think, during the public hearing, who has all of this property under contract and who's moving forward with these sites. And when I say all of it, it includes the R40 piece, which will need to be zoned at some point, and I think he's going to touch on some of those uses. From an overall standpoint, the developer likes the fit of the use that we're suggesting, the use that we would like to put to this property. And so, and we have to request industrial, obviously, because the code is somewhat antiquated and still treats self-storage facilities as industrial uses. So from how we analyze this case, I think there's essentially 2 buckets. And the first bucket is, how do we compare it with the land use? And then how do we compare it with the zoning? Because the existing zoning, as Mary noted, on this Lot A that we're working on right now, would permit a multitude of uses. It would permit restaurants, and it would permit fast food with a drive-through. It notes that drive-throughs are permitted on the site. I mean, so there are a multitude of other uses that could be put to this property and will be put to this property because the zoning allows it. And so we would submit, my client, who's the applicant, who's the proposed builder of this facility, we would submit that this is a reasonable use of this property given those circumstances. As you all are aware, self-storage facilities have come a long ways. They're no longer what they used to be. They're safe. They're conditioned. They look like office buildings. I mean, they look nice. And one big benefit, especially in places like Cary, which is growing fast, they are low traffic generators. And so when you kind of consider what is going to happen on this site, and there's going to be a lot of development that occurs that generates a lot of traffic, this is an opportunity to put a use in that will be complementary. It's a use that's in high demand, as you all are aware, and it's a use that ultimately will not generate a lot of traffic associated with it. So we think it is a reasonable request under the circumstances, and those circumstances, again, are the fact that the zoning is already in place. There are already pieces moving through the process that are dramatically going to change this landscape. And whether it is this use or another use, some use will be put to this property. Our use requires a rezoning, but there are a multitude of others that would not require a rezoning. And so with that, we're here to answer any questions that you all inevitably will have associated with it. We've been working on, as Mary mentioned, we've been working on conditions to kind of make clear the picture of what is going to be delivered on the site, and that condition that we have with respect to 85% of the overall square footage being in a single building with the units accessed on the interior. And so we're here to answer questions on that, and we would respectfully request you all's recommendation of approval for this case. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak to this public hearing? If so, we see one.
That'd be great. I hate doing these things, so just bear with me as I work through this. I'm Kevin. I'm with Mangum Development. We're the master developer for this site, and I wanted to pass out a brochure that gives you a bigger view of the site with what our vision is and how we're trying to balance that vision with the economic realities of what we're working with. There's, as you heard earlier, a decent chunk of this project that would be devoted for retail. We are configuring this for other uses outside of retail. The way this originally came together was to appeal towards millennials, wanting a multitude of services where they live, where they work, where they play, as well as trying to figure out how this is going to fit in Cary, how it's going to look good, how it's going to work. So we came up with a design that incorporated a multitude of uses. We wound up talking with Jack and Ed last week to get some feedback and solicit their advice on how to move forward. The retail piece clearly is moving forward, but we really do want to see some extra office. And so what we're proposing, or what we are working towards with Lot D, which is that pie-shaped lot that's left over from this site, is an office parcel. We've been able to get about 80,000 feet out of a conceptual design. Class A, that's the only way you can really go and make the numbers work. For the back piece, we've envisioned, we think the site works best for multifamily, but we realize that there may be some opportunities for offices here. I would clearly rather do office. I love office, but there's a substantial amount of topography, as well as buffers back there that we've got to contend with. And so just know that we're considering that, and we're amenable to working both ways as this project moves forward. On the second page, I just wanted to briefly show you some of the issues we deal with the parcel sizes, the shapes, and trying to fit other uses than retail on there. We've got that 230 kilovolt power line that runs from, I think, Apex all the way into Raleigh. We've got stream buffers on the right-hand side, and what's not shown right here is just the topography we've got to work with, which is pretty extreme. But anyway, nonetheless, that's all I wanted to show you, and thank you for your time. If you have any questions, we're here to answer them.
Thank you. Before you leave, could we have your full name, please?
Kevin Mangum.
Thanks.
Yes.
Anyone else like to speak to this public hearing?
My name is John Quirk.
If I could ask you to move to the other podium.
This one?
Yes, right there.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. My name is John Quirk. I'm a homeowner on Larkwood Lane. Moved there about 21 years ago. And at that time, that area was quite different. Tryon was just a two-lane road, a lot of trees. And there's been a lot of development in that area. And what I haven't heard was anyone talking about the noise that will be created and the light pollution. The noise coming off Highway 1 is awful. It's just a roar, and it's 7 days a week. And I guess the highway has some kind of skid-proof grooving on it, which increases the road, motorcycles and trucks. And now we're looking at this development was one of the last little pieces right next to that park. I run on that greenway, and that area is very nice through the park and up. But this development is right smack on it, and it's going to change things. And tonight, I did not know Sheetz is also. Have you ever gone to a Sheetz service station? I mean, these things are made for being along the interstates. Bright lights, blasting music. A lot of people just hanging out, cars. A Sheetz station is awful to put into these poor people that have to put up with the noise and the lights they're going to get. And now they have an Aldi, probably more traffic. It's a lot of traffic on Southeast Cary Parkway right now, particularly during the morning and afternoon rush hours. It just backs up. It comes down Tryon and making a right onto Cary Parkway. You wait, and the noise, particularly the noise for additional traffic, I think that's going to affect the people on Larkwood and the summer winds. And another thing I noticed, there's a road where it says Larkwood, and then a little road that connects out to Cary Parkway. That road was trying to be built by the Parkway Professional Center a while back, and the developer wanted to put that in. And it was shown that it's in the deed that was from the people that gave summer winds to the city, I assume, that would never be a through road. And yet there it is. It's right on the map, so I expect that's going to happen. But I think walking through there, using that area, and having the people live around there, it seems like no one has come out. I don't understand that. But I sit around, and it used to be full of hawks, and not anymore. The birds are down. Everything is down. The trees are going down. People are clearing their lots. The noise is just creating. And I, as a homeowner, say that this will just create excessive noise between the three of these properties. And somewhere along the way, you have to, I think of that and draw the line. That's all I had to say. I didn't plan, like I said, I didn't plan to be here. I don't have anything prepared, but I will now. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? I'm scanning the room, and I see no one else showing any indication of coming down, so the public hearing is now closed. We will open the floor for questions of our applicant.
Excuse me, if I could make one comment before you begin. Just wanted to point out with some of Mr. Mangum's comments, any discussion or comments through the public hearing related to other parcels or plans for the balance of the property, the other commercial pieces and office pieces, should not be taken into consideration for this rezoning request. You should just be looking, the only thing that we can really guarantee through the rezoning process is what's approved with the zoning conditions and the regulations for this particular site. So.
Thank you very much. Caution I was going to share as well. Yes, we have one lot and some zoning conditions and a change and a removal from an overlay district. That's the sum total of what we're considering. So does anyone have any questions to ask of Ms. Bierman or the applicant at this point? Yes.
With what's shown on this particular site is called a cul-de-sac, but it may not always be a cul-de-sac. Is that correct? Would it possibly open through streets to other surrounding properties?
Well, it would certainly could be used to access property in the R40 part when that portion is developed in the future as part of the transportation network for this site. I think in terms of any other actual road connections there between the floodplain features, I think that's a practical limitation for providing additional connection points to the east. That and the fact that it's already developed with residential areas, it doesn't really lend itself to connect.
So the cul-de-sac could be extended backwards.
It could be extended to the north to ultimately create a road network within this quadrant.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else with a question for the applicant or for the staff?
I have a couple of questions for staff. Ms. Bierman, the specific to zoning condition number 5, the operating hours, I haven't, at least in my time on this board, seen many zoning conditions that involve operating hours. Does the town of Cary actually, is there a precedence for compliance with those, and is that something the town can enforce?
We have had some cases where the operating hours have been approved as a zoning condition. From a practical standpoint, with enforcement of that, it is very challenging.
But it is something. So say I'm a homeowner, and I realize that this is one of the concerns of some of the neighbors are the operating hours. If there were incidents where this became an issue, is that something that they would be able to reach out to zoning compliance and get rectified?
Yes, they would.
Okay.
They would be able to reach out to us, and we have made this comment in previous cases as well. From a practical standpoint, it may take longer to address than a number of zoning conditions because at the time when the infraction would be occurring, there wouldn't be people on staff. So there's a lot of documentation and time that would be involved in that.
Okay, I understand. My other question, and it was really alluded to at this case, is now that we have a new comprehensive plan, and I'm not really sure if you can speak to this now, but what's the timeline with a comprehensive rezoning, so to speak, where we're going to go back and align the existing zoning to our new comprehensive plan? Do we have a timeline on that?
No, we don't have a timeline for that. I think within the plan there are a number of major work items to go through to have our regulations in the plan come in closer conformity for some big, in the broad scale. In the meantime, we have a lot of policies and direction to work with the current zoning that we have to make those decisions. And in the long run, we will be continuing to improve that relationship with the implementation.
Okay, understood.
Any other questions?
Yes, Jim. Just so I make sure I understand, I'm going to try not to talk about Lot B or C, but for Lot A, today, there are commercial applications that could go on Lot A that would possibly not even come to the council or this board. Is that correct?
Yes, all of the uses that you see on this list are permitted today. And, for the general commercial portion of the site.
Correct, for the most of it.
Right. So all of these uses are permitted today. If the development plan comes in and it's the site plan or development plan is proposed in accordance with the standards found in the ordinance, then that is a staff approval. Unless there's some exceptions or waivers or modifications of standards that are requested for some reason, those could all be approved or would be approved administratively.
And that would include putting in, for example, the cul-de-sac for access to Lot A, if it was one of these allowable.
Well, there is a subdivision plan that has been submitted and is in review now to create 4 lots out of this larger lot, with this particular lot being one of them. So that subdivision is in review now. So this lot could be created. It's required to have access so that it's required to have a road so that you can get to it in creating the subdivision. And with the timing that the applicant has proposed, he is proceeding with requesting rezoning of this lot, knowing what he would like to put on that. But even in the absence of this rezoning request, that subdivision plan would be moving forward with the creation of the road in this lot.
So for the neighborhood, just for their understanding and for their concerns, this area is going to be commercial kind of regardless of what we're doing here. I mean, it's predestined to be that in some proper form.
The current zoning has, for some time, since 1987, allowed the commercial uses that are being considered today on the other parcels that are allowed by right under the current zoning, and the subdivision that's being created. Those are all things that can be pursued according to the current zoning on the property, completely independent of this request. Even if this request were to be withdrawn today, all of those 3 items, the subdivision and the 2 development plans, could continue.
And I have one other question about the facility itself, and then I'll hush. Will the facility have storage areas for like boats and RVs and things of that nature that would be seen or not? I've seen some of these storage facilities have, they have exterior, you can put large items. I'm just thinking of obstruction.
It could. There's nothing to preclude that. The uses that are listed include the mini storage and outdoor storage. With the rezoning of this nature, we don't have a preliminary development plan to see exactly how that's laid out. That the only limitation in terms of the larger use or structure issue with it is the 85% of the building space will be for storage with interior access as opposed to exterior access. Any storage area that could be enclosed in a fence, there's not a specific limitation on that. There is a zoning condition that says if there is a fence, which presumably would be associated with outdoor storage area, that it would be black and it would be wrought iron or aluminum, excuse me, if it was visible from a public right-of-way.
Okay.
But there's no limitation on the area or what could be stored in there.
Does the applicant have an answer to that as well? I'm getting the impression he does.
We're not going to have any outdoor storage on the site, no boats and trailers and things of that nature. Didn't include it as a condition, just didn't even think about it, to be honest with you. We would be happy. And I know you all have to act on the conditions that are in front of you, but I can tell you that when we leave this room tonight, we will add a condition to address that concern.
Okay. Any other questions?
Jason, maybe another question. The artistic rendering here, I understand it's marketing, so I don't want to put too much stock into it.
Yeah, and it's not mine.
But
so.
It seems to suggest a building that has a office look and feel. It doesn't look like a big white concrete building that's just slab sides and storage is inside, I guess. Is there something aesthetically going to occur here with this facility such that it might blend in with a potential office or other things here?
Well, the 2 things. First is it will be a multi-story building. That condition is included. And then second, the community appearance manual does a really good job of making sure that uses like this look the way they're supposed to look, for lack of a better way to put it. We talked about how to address it, architectural conditions, and we actually offered some things that were already required by the ordinance. I can tell you there's a single master developer, from what I understand, and so he's going to make sure from an architectural compatibility standpoint things will complement each other. But the best I can give you is that we'll comply with the community appearance manual, which does a pretty good job of requiring masonry and glazing on the bottom floors and things of that nature.
Ms. Bierman, may I ask you just to sort of collaborate from the planning point of view, what sort of aesthetic requirements you might have for a facility like that, just to continue on what Jason said?
I'm not familiar with the specifics, but Jason is correct. We do have the appearance manual that speaks to the materials and the glazing. There haven't been any requirements offered in addition to the minimum requirements of the, or the requirements of the appearance manual, but those are, that does provide a quality design that we require of all of our buildings in Cary.
Got it. And one other question. I don't want to speak to any of the properties, but I'm just curious, given there's from this artistic rendering here, some anticipation of something potentially up in the other area being developed. It says office, multifamily. Why is it that perhaps this whole plan for up here might not all be integrated together and figure out what you're trying to do, as opposed to commit today to the property we're looking at, which may preclude more interesting things to be done with the whole package? Just trying to understand the sequencing and ordering here, not trying to speak the other areas, but it just prompts a question of, you know, if this were to happen here, it might preclude other interesting, higher value, aesthetically interesting, work productive, whatever, consistent with the Cary plan. If that was to be dropped there, it might preclude that, other things being wrapped around. I just feel like we may be giving away something too soon.
I would just say, and generally, that the property owner does have the right to request for his property or a portion of his property, an individual request for a portion of that to be rezoned. It's not, so they're certainly entitled to make that request. It's not always feasible to look at significantly larger areas when they're in different ownerships and stages of development.
The developer seems interested in maybe saying something.
I'm sorry he can't with the applicant, Mr. Barron.
Yeah, can we go to slide 5? I think there's a logical answer. And the logical answer is a majority of the site is already zoned for uses that are ready to move forward. And so you only ask for permission for things that you need permission for. And they're asking for permission for those things, but there are things that are already covered in the ordinance. So whatever happens on this R40 piece here, which is pretty large, is going to have to go through a rezoning process. It's zoned residential 40. And so whether it's multifamily, whether it's office, not sure what's going to happen there, you all and then the council will see that as part of a zoning case. Otherwise, I mean, the general commercial stuff is zoned for those purposes.
But not zoned currently for storage.
Correct. That's exactly right. Yep.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm going to try not to confuse myself. Okay, so on the rendering that we have, we see the road that's going in through the cul-de-sac. On Cary Parkway, there's, I can't really tell where that's going to be, but there's only a couple of turn-ins on Cary Parkway. So as far as coming out of the property to make a left-hand turn onto Cary Parkway, will that be a condition on one of the other lots to make that accessible for a left-hand turn, or will it require a traffic study and possibly a light to come in and out of there based on the amount of traffic that the other properties may garner? Does that make sense?
You can see here roughly where the cul-de-sac would extend, where the road would extend through there. The ultimate cross-section or design for Cary Parkway in the comprehensive transportation plan is 4 lanes, median divided, which is built.
Right.
My understanding with the subdivision that's in review, that there would be a deceleration lane required.
Okay.
As part of the subdivision. And then I really can't speak at this point to what additional access points there would be, associated with that. I think those are still under discussion. But as I'm not aware of a traffic signal at this point, traffic signals, as you know, can be challenging in the spacing requirements. It's not too distant to the next traffic signal at the interchange. Any signalization has to be warranted through DOT. So there, I don't know what the status of that is, but I'm certainly not aware of any planned signals at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Have we any other questions? I have a few. And they focus mostly on the community plan, and I would like to look at, once again, the shape section that you had presented to us earlier. My question is, looking at engage and looking at work, I see that a mini storage unit in this location would not achieve many of the goals of the community plan in the particular policies, but it seemed as though shape allowed a little more latitude considering what else was around there. I would just like to hear once again, if you would walk me through that one section one more time.
For the shape
Yes.
policy. Yeah, there are several other policies listed in your staff report that I didn't specifically call out. I would like to go back and just perhaps for clarification point out that the work policy as a more overarching policy, kind of from the bigger picture, was why we kind of emphasized that policy in the presentation, but there's certainly several others that are in your staff report that sort of tie in with that as well. And then in moving to the shape policy, policy 7, there is the provision in the plan just recognizing that there are some uses that we see occasionally that are a little bit different, that don't necessarily fit in well in a commercial area, mini storage being one of them, where it's commercial in nature, and commercial and industrial in nature, particularly when you look more how the ordinance was set up in the past, where typically in the past these have been more of a industrial type look with the outdoor doors, the sort of the old school of mini storage facilities. So we just think that there are some uses that this would qualify as that are miscellaneous type uses that don't really fit cleanly into other districts, and that if you're along major roadway corridors, which this is, and there's buffering from other uses that are lower intensity, that it helps to support that type of use and where they can be located. And we felt like this meets that requirement.
That's very clear. Thank you. If there are no more questions for the applicant or for the staff, would someone care to make a motion about this case, one way or the other?
I'll make a motion. I move that the board forward case number 16 REZ 30 to Town Council with a recommendation for approval as it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans and is reasonable and in the public interest for the reasons set forth in the staff report and presentation.
Thank you. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second.
Carla, would you start us off?
So, we're probably all experiencing a little storage facility fatigue. I probably know more about them than I ever cared to. But, looking at this in context, the fact that it's going to be kind of stashed behind other commercial, the low-intensity usage that it presents, next to the park and to these neighborhoods, I think it's probably a pretty good fit for this site.
Pretty much the same thing. I think it's a good fit for the property, and I like some of the operating hours, et cetera, and the fencing to be black, et cetera. I think it's a good fit for that area.
Any other discussion on this? Yes.
I found this to be a hard one. I mean, I do support it, but, I know this property's been available for a long time. It'd been really nice for some large employer to come in here and put something in that would be, drive a lot of jobs. And I know there's going to be some creation in here. I mean, I do get that. But based on the way it's zoned today, based on what's going on, I agree. This is probably the best place to put this is in the back, and they seem to have done a good mitigation with it. So, for those reasons, I would go ahead and support it, just based on what's going to happen with the property anyway. And I know this is hard on the neighborhood, but I guess it's going to come in one form or the other. This may be one of the better forms.
Anyone else?
Yeah, pipe in. Those are kind of my thoughts exactly. Ideally, I would have liked to see this develop as an office. I think this is probably a good place for it, but due to two cases or two or developments down there that really this board and council doesn't have purview to, I think that this is really the best that we have for that area. I am excited about the overall vision for this area and really look forward to seeing that. And I also like how the applicant did address a lot of the concerns. The additional zoning conditions, I think, were great in adding this and kind of presenting a more comprehensive a case that really addressed some of those concerns that were brought up at the council public hearing.
Was there another comment over here?
Yeah, I struggle with this as well, maybe for a little different reason, but there is a need for storage in this part of Cary. It is of limited availability. And the location there does provide, you've got electric lines, you've got a park, you've got a gas station in front. I'm not sure how attractive that piece of property would be for a lot of other uses. It currently could be zoned for, a sports bar kind of complex, which would have a lot more traffic, a lot more lights, and well past midnight, which would be less conducive to the neighbors in the area. Storage areas are pretty much dead, and if it's going to be internal, I don't know that it'll be a lighting issue as some other commercial use could be. But it really hurts me that we can't, with the Cary plan now in place, think of this as a more interesting chunk of property here, particularly down to the freeway as well. And we're carving out this one, making a decision today. And I guess the bird in the hand versus two in the bush is always the situation. But, boy, I'd like to see something more interesting on this remaining to-be-determined piece of property down towards the freeway if we're to go for this. The aesthetic things, I'm just going to assume, based on the conversation we had, that this is going to look pleasing. It's not going to look like your old-fashioned storage unit. And to the extent that is part of the way things have to be done, I'm satisfied that to hide this back there with that kind of aesthetics would be okay.
Any other comments on this side?
I'm going to vote against this. And I'm going to vote against it not necessarily on the project itself, but as we look at the community plan going forward, and looking at, as we keep talking about, it was highlighted in one of the slides about, one of the last prime sites to be developed. I would have preferred to have seen this rezoning come in after the site plans had been approved for the other two commercial uses. But I guess for myself, I'm deciding that, just because they've been submitted doesn't necessarily guarantee they're going to happen. And if we're going to go through this with a 40-acre opportunity site, if you will, and we're looking at two commercial uses that don't have to come before us, but they're in for site review, I'd like to know that they've been reviewed and sites have been approved and a little more indication that it's going to go forward. And that's just, again, it's not necessarily about the usage. It's just kind of more of a longer the process as we look at the plan. So it sounds like the project's going to move forward, but at least make sure it's not going to pass by unanimous, and so it has to be removed from the consent agenda. So.
You have something as well, Chuck?
I agree with him. It just keeps kicking around in my head that we're supposed to decide what is the highest and best use for a piece of land. O&I, office buildings, are allowed by the current zoning. To me, there ought to be office buildings going in there. Doesn't mean that you can't put commercial, because you can put commercial. But the highest and best use, from my view, for this tract is office, and that's not a storage facility. And as you say, it tends to run counter to the plan that we just adopted. So I would vote no on it.
Anyone else?
I like what Dan said. I think if these others have not been approved yet, and there's still potential for seeing something of larger scale that's more conducive in this area, and that would keep the noise factor down or keep the visual appeal up, then I would like to kind of take our time and wait for something like that to surface or make it a must-do for this eventually, if that's what it has to be. I think, again, the storage facilities, everybody said, is going to be a quiet zone by itself, but the other things around it potentially are kind of noisy and potentially traffic-inducing. And so it's a little bit of a disconnect with that neighborhood nearby.
Anyone else? Well, before I call it to a vote, I'll just give you my brief idea here. On the case itself, on the macro look at this case, it's very well buffered. It's kind of an unusual parcel lot that we're looking at. For putting in storage facilities, which probably have evolved more than any other type of use since I've been in on doing this, they are way different than they were just 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, these things are just different. And I think that the conditions are very well articulated to limit this thing and make it as good a neighbor as possible while still being functional. And I'm really swayed very much by the shape discussion in the community plan analysis, which is this is an unusual situation somewhat, and this fits. Two unusual things kind of fit together to make something that matches fairly well. And I very much appreciate the idea of waiting for a different use, but I assume that a significant amount of waiting has already gone on. That's macro. And I'm going to support this one, but that's micro. From a macro standpoint, I want to just touch on something the applicant said, which is we're outdated in how we're looking at storage facilities. These things have come up several times to us, and we have to pull them out of mixed use or out of overlay districts because it's an industrial use, and that doesn't fit inside. But these things are pretty much urban, small home supplemental thing. They're not people who are doing small engine repair and we just haven't caught up to that yet. I'm hoping with the community plan and a newer look at how these things fit in and what parts of neighborhoods they really serve, that we can update the way we do this. It seems like we go through great pains with storage facilities every time. And from our own systemic standpoint, we should be able to address them a little more differently. I mean, we shouldn't have to have an applicant lay 7 and 8 conditions out to take this from this is not your grandfather's storage facility to this is your son's and daughter's storage facility. We should be able to adapt our way of doing it to this really quickly evolving use. And I hope we do that going forward. And I'd love to see a work session or something, or maybe just kick that idea around, because I think there's other things like storage facilities that we ought to be looking at as well that are just the use is evolving faster than our ability to keep up with it from a policy standpoint. And I'd really like to have that discussion. But that belabors this point, and I don't want to do that any longer. Does anyone else have anything else before I call this to a vote? No? Then would all those in favor of 16 REZ 30 please say aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no, and raise your hand if you will.
No.
I have 3 noes. So we go 6-3 on that. The motion does, in fact, pass. Thank you very much. We are done with our public hearings for this evening. We now move to our cases without a public hearing, as I said before. All the rules apply for the applicant and the staff. It's just we won't hear from anyone else. Our first case without a public hearing is 16 REZ 16. Hello, Ms. Dry.
Hello. Good evening, Board. For your consideration is a request to rezone approximately 2.06 acres from residential 40 to mixed-use district. This site is located at the northeast corner of Walnut Street and Tryon Road. You can see the property here highlighted in yellow. It's actually the site that's being requested to be rezoned is actually one property and a sliver of a second piece of property. There's a small triangular sliver of property to the east that's being requested to be rezoned as well. You can see on this vicinity map, the Tryon Village Shopping Center is to the west. Colonial Baptist Church is diagonal across the intersection. There's a CVS site located directly to the south. This is just a few pictures of the intersection where the site is located. The property, the subject site is actually this vacant property located right here in this top picture. And you can see the church adjacent. Across the street is the Tryon Village Shopping Center. To the south of the intersection, there is a CVS pharmacy, and then there is a cemetery with some well-established trees on the other corner. The current zoning for the property is R40. The property is within the mixed-use overlay district. The applicant is requesting to rezone the property to mixed-use district, as you can see indicated here in blue. This rezoning was originally submitted with a comprehensive plan amendment. However, with the adoption of the Cary Community Plan, this area is now designated as a destination center, and so the need for a comprehensive plan amendment is no longer needed or required, so that went away once the Cary Community Plan was adopted. Because this property is being rezoned or being requested to be rezoned to mixed-use district, it requires a preliminary development plan be submitted to accompany the rezoning. The applicant has submitted a preliminary development plan for a restaurant with a drive-through. You can see the building located here in dark green or dark gray, surrounded by the parking area, the restaurant adjacent to Walnut Street, and then the vegetated area around the outskirts of the property. This is a closer view of the preliminary development plan. So just to orient you, we have Walnut Street to the west, Tryon Road to the south. The Macedonia United Methodist Church is right here adjacent to the site. Because the mixed-use district is a flexible zoning district, this allows a property owner to rezone the property subject to the preliminary development plan, which they're proposing here. So with the mixed-use district, there are no minimum dimensional standards. The applicant can set their standards with those that are shown on the preliminary development plan. So for this site, the applicant first submitted their plan on June 2nd, 2016. And the plan was reviewed through the Town of Cary Development Review Committee. This next series of slides just highlights a few of the elements of the plan. The boundaries for the rezoning are highlighted here in red. There is a stream buffer located in the northeastern corner of the property. They've indicated where they're proposing to put their stormwater management device. They are required by the LDO to have a 10-foot street side trail along Walnut Street. They're proposing an increase in parking to allow 50 parking spaces. They're also proposing to have a recessed front door. I'll talk a little bit more about that on some of the next slides. And they're also proposing to have parking between the thoroughfare of Tryon Road and the front of the building. There was also a traffic study conducted for this site for a fast food restaurant with a drive-through with a maximum size of 4,700 square feet. The applicant is proposing to construct 2 driveways to the site. First, a right in and right out on Walnut Street with a deceleration lane into the site, and then a right in on Tryon Road. The applicant has offered to make one off-site traffic improvement as recommended by the traffic study. This includes at the intersection of Holly Springs and Cary Parkway, restriping an existing eastbound through lane to a combination left and through lane and modifying the signal timing. So to summarize some of the elements of the plan, they're proposing, again, the land use fee, restaurant with a drive-through use, maximum building size of 4,700 square feet, building height of 22 feet, a 10-foot street side trail. And under the evaluation of the Cary Community Plan, the site is located in one of 5 destination centers for the town of Cary. These areas are Cary's premier walkable, vibrant mixed-use centers. And so we find that while a commercial use is an appropriate use, in a destination center, a single-story structure with ample service parking may not further the intent of the plan. However, staff also notes that this is a relatively small site and it is constrained with environmental features such as a stream buffer to the north of the site. Again, because this is a flexible zoning district, the applicant can set their dimensional standards. So the following is a list of some of the standards that they're proposing that differ from the requirements of the LDO. So they are proposing to increase their parking. Their required parking is 32 spaces for this use. They're proposing 50 spaces. They're also proposing parking located between the building and Tryon Road. The ordinance requires that parking be located to the side and the rear of a building when you're at the intersection of two thoroughfares. Lastly, they're also proposing that the front door be recessed, so recessed from the front facade. And within a mixed-use district, there's a requirement that the front door address the street or the intersection when you're at the intersection of two thoroughfares like the site is. According to the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Resources Facilities Master Plan, Walnut Street has a street side trail shown along the property frontage. According to the Transportation Plan, both Tryon Road and Walnut Street are major thoroughfares. The site is adjacent to a future planned local route on Walnut Street. There were 2 neighborhood meetings for the site. First was July 6th, and there were no attendees. The town had the applicant provide a second neighborhood meeting because, as I mentioned before, this rezoning includes one property and a sliver of a second property to the east, so they updated their application to include that additional piece of property or sliver of property. So we had them hold a second neighborhood meeting. There were 2 attendees at that meeting. There were some questions at the meeting about their proposed use, road widening along Tryon Road, and access points to the site. At the public hearing, there were questions from a citizen about road widening on Tryon Road. And there was also questions from council about traffic safety and access to the site, the location of parking and parking dimensions, and materials for the street side trails. So this concludes staff's presentation. The applicant is here to share comments. Following that, staff will be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Board. My name is Neil Ghosh. I'm with the Morningstar Law Group. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. I'd like to thank Katie for her presentation. I think she did a good job going over the particulars of this case. So I'll try to be brief. We do have members of the development team here available to answer questions. But overall, this is, to sum it up, is for a fast food restaurant, this site. This site has been owned for a long time by the church, and the church has been looking for a use that they think is, complementary of their operation. So we're glad to have their support on this one. Other than that, we do think, as was mentioned, the comprehensive plan, when we originally submitted this, there was a comprehensive plan amendment required. Since the adoption of the Cary Community Plan, that's no longer required, but we do think that this plan still is consistent with the Cary Community Plan. It addresses many of the policies within the Cary Community Plan, and certainly, as the staff report points out, there are some policies that are inconsistent, but given the size of this site and shape of it, it's actually very hard to do, a multitude of types of development here, so we think it's appropriate for a fast food use. With that, I'll turn it over to you guys to answer any questions you guys have. And like I said, we do have members of our development team here available to answer questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for the applicant or the staff on this case? I'll look to this side first.
Yeah, I'm very swayed by a lot of the things that the staff said in the report. And so, it sounds like the size of this is the sticking point. Is there, legitimately, what else could be put here on something this site that would fit what we want to meet the plan? You know, because I think if you put something that's 2 stories, then you're going to run into a parking issue because you don't have as much space.
Yeah, that's certainly true. To address that question, there are a couple different factors that we had to look at with the analysis of the Cary Community Plan. Like I mentioned in the presentation, because this is a destination center, it would encourage a more intense use. However, like you said as well, we recognize this is a relatively small piece of property with a stream buffer to the north and developed property to the east. So there is not a lot of opportunity for compiling a larger site. So we understand that there are different factors at play.
Okay.
This, I know that the church just next door here has been looking to sell this property for quite some time and has had very little interest because of its constraints from comments made in the last public hearing. And I think they've fit as much as they possibly can in the space available. But getting in and out of the property here from Tryon seems to entail using a road which I interpret is not a public road, but that's some access road that is still on church property.
Are you referring to this area
Yeah,
here?
both of them. So there was one that's sort of one way only, and then there's, I think, in the bigger view of this thing that I have the other map here someplace. Getting out back to Tryon Road, you can't use that little one-way cutout. You've got to go a little further right past the front of the church. So that's, I understand there was some discussion about an easement that was part of this development, an arrangement with the church, but is that something where the church changes their mind and all of a sudden you've got a restaurant here that you can't get in and get out? It's like the Hotel California. You can drive in, but you can't drive out. I don't understand how, as we're approving this property, we're very dependent upon those pieces of concrete there that are on the church property. Help me with, I'm struggling with that.
Just in regards to what this site would have allowance for, they would have the right in only on Tryon Road, is what they're proposing to construct. Let me pull up a slide to illustrate that. Yeah, so the right in on Tryon Road, and then a right in off of Walnut Street and a right out off of Walnut Street. And I'll have one of our plan reviewers talk a little bit more about some of the additional factors he may be considering.
Okay.
Hi, Doug Loveland with the Planning and Development Department. There is a access easement that is proposed and required over the access drive that's going to guarantee access through that. So that would be irrevocable access.
Irrevocable by the church, whoever would ever
For both
acquire
parties.
that property.
It'll be platted. It'll be a required access easement. Okay. So the requirement to allow access onto that site through the church property will run with the land.
Got it. So that easement, because to get out back to Tryon, you've got to go a little further because the one is one way. Got to go a little further and loop down there, which does prompt another question because, there are drivers, I'm sure we've all seen them, that despite that one way, the most quickest way to get back onto Tryon is going to go the opposite way.
I don't know how far to the east that access easement extends. It definitely allows access to the western access point on Tryon. Does it extend all the way to the east? I have to say I'm not aware. Perhaps the site engineer may know that.
Katie, could you just show that little wider thing there just to help clarify on that? I hate to be a stickler.
Are you referring to this
yes, exactly. Exactly.
Okay, sure.
So there's the one way in that you pointed out.
So there's an access easement proposed and required to grant easement access here. Does the easement extend here? Honestly, off the top of my head, I can't recall.
Because the out, to get back to Tryon, does depend on, you can see the way the arrows are on the plat, you have to be able to have that easement access all the way there. And that other road a little further east on Tryon, which would be both ways, goes further deeper into the property. But, again, you could have the slip in, but you couldn't slip out. You couldn't drive out.
So what I'm hearing is that the cross-access easement that you're referring to would only go into that one-way road. It would not extend further beyond to that entrance right there at Tryon.
So how would you assure being able to get back onto Tryon Road after you had the one-way access in? The parking lot has a diagram of going both ways, but if you didn't have that access further, you just have to drive around the parking lot and the back of the church and over to Jones Farm. You know.
Excuse me a second. Who are you?
I'm sorry, yeah. Chris Bostic with Kimley Horn, site engineer.
I'm afraid we don't have a public hearing at this point. Is he an extension of the applicant? We're cool? Okay. All right. Good.
Yeah, so to clear this up, as Katie mentioned, you have the right-in driveway on Tryon Road, which is shown going directly into the Bojangles property.
We didn't know it was Bojangles, but okay.
Well, it changes.
So they'll be open on Sunday. Traffic with the church.
And then
okay.
you have a right-in, right-out on Tryon Road, and that is a cross-access. So there is a cross-access that goes to the property from the church where the cursor is. So there is cross-access that will be required there, as Doug mentioned earlier.
So that's also going to be an irrevocable
correct
easement access?
Just like what Doug said, but that is the only cross-access that goes across the property.
Okay. Okay. So that's how you can get out back to Tryon?
That's exactly right. Yes, sir.
Okay. And
Sorry
the only way, unless you go against traffic and use the other one, which we don't want to encourage. Okay.
Is there a median on Tryon Road there in front of that? I can't remember.
There's a median for a portion of it, but as you go back to the east, it's striped from that point on.
Because, I mean, you know, as you point out, people will turn left into the right end.
First day.
Oh, yeah. I mean, constantly. So it would be good if there were a median there, but I can't remember if there is one.
There is a median.
There is a median, but there's a break in the median almost immediately across, well, in between those two entrances on Tryon. It's a break for the fire station across the street.
Oh.
But that's not for people to use to make a U-turn. But it may become, at any rate. So kind of also traffic related too, with the long-term plan to convert this as part of Tryon, I guess, from Walnut to the east to 6 lanes. I know there was some concern, and could you maybe just explain to me, if we go to 6 lanes, whose property would be impeded, either CVS or the new fast food restaurant here, if we met that 6-lane requirement, or maybe nobody, everything's going to be just fine, even though we go to 6 lanes.
Sure. I'd like to call up a member of our Transportation Facilities Department to help address that question.
Okay.
Good evening, Board. My name is Priyatam Khanna with Transportation Facilities. If the 6-lane facility is ever to be realized, then we would first need a third eastbound through lane from the west side of the intersection. At this point, we don't have that, and I don't believe there is a capital project to construct that lane. If that is constructed, then the additional lane on the right-of-way would be coming from the south side of Tryon Road.
Where the CVS is at?
That is correct.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay.
Because the north side of Tryon Road, the north side of the road, which is essentially westbound, already has sufficient asphalt and lane width to realize half of the 6-lane facility.
Because you have a left turn lane there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So this wouldn't be impacted by that, but CVS, okay, that's another story. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Might as well stay on this side of the table. Anyone else with any questions? I shall move to this side. Anyone else have a question for the
Excuse me. Go ahead. Go ahead, Chuck. There was a note in our materials that said that there were some proposed conditions that were met and there were some that had not been addressed. Could you tell us if those proposed conditions from staff were subsequently met or not?
Are you referring to the traffic study?
Yeah, I think you are.
That could be.
Yeah.
So with the site, there was a traffic study that was conducted, and the traffic study identified some off-site improvements that could be made with this. Now, off-site improvements would be a voluntary condition that the applicant would propose. So what they did was looked at the off-site condition or improvements that were recommended from the traffic study. They're proposing to do one of the off-site improvements, which was to restripe an existing eastbound through lane at the intersection of Holly Springs and Cary Parkway. They're not proposing to do any of the other off-site improvements, but again, all of that would be voluntary, and they're choosing to do one of the 4 improvements that were listed.
What were the other 3?
So at the intersection of Walnut Street and Holly Springs Road and Tryon Road, construct an exclusive eastbound right turn lane. At the intersection of Tryon Road and Jones Franklin, construct an exclusive westbound right turn lane. And then at the intersection of Tryon Road and Yates Mill Pond Road, construct a 3rd northbound left turn lane with a receiving lane on Tryon Road. And again, the one that they agreed to do was at the intersection of Holly Springs and Cary Parkway, restripe an existing eastbound through lane to a combination left through lane.
Oh, that was it? Okay. Anything else over here?
I have a question back on, I think it's slide 32, about the LDO requirements in the applicant's proposal. And I guess the question is on a couple of things regarding the parking. And so help me understand, Katie, the increased parking, so what's required by the site is a minimum of 32 spaces, parking spaces, and so that's the town's requirement?
Yes, I believe that's actually a minimum and a maximum. Yes, minimum and a maximum. So they're proposing to increase that to 50 spaces.
Okay, by their choice. Okay, so then in the parking where it was required of the parking to be to the side and rear, I thought there was something about, in major intersections, like about street frontage, or did we have an appearance ordinance or some rule, for lack of a better term, regarding appearance? I guess the point I'm getting at is I'm trying to get my head wrapped around the traffic flow, and it's not really in some ways my issue, but I'm looking at also what we have in terms of what required in terms of side and rear, and we have a lot of it's now front loaded. And looking at, it seems as though that's just going to be a cluster in the morning, in terms of a cluster of cars driving around. And if you eliminate the possibility, I guess, of eliminating one of those rows of parking in the very front would help with both the traffic and also an appearance from there at the main intersection. Because what we're going to have is from a visibility is basically cars parking right there in the corner of Tryon and Walnut. So I guess that's just a question, more a question of the process of how we got there, and I guess in the other way it would just be a comment that seems it would be a much better project if without it.
Yeah, to address your question, the LDO actually states that when you have a non-residential building at the intersection of 2 thoroughfares like this one, that there's no parking allowed between the building and those rights-of-way. Because this is in a mixed-use overlay district, the applicant's requesting to allow parking, and that can be considered by the board and the council. So they're requesting to vary from the ordinance in this case. So
the ordinance, if I understand what you just said, so the ordinance says that there can't be parking and that they only needed 32 spaces, which is the minimum maximum. And so what the applicant is saying that we want to increase the parking, understood, but we want to put the parking into the front of the building from the streetscape perspective. Okay.
Just a quick clarification. It wouldn't actually be in the streetscape. They will be maintaining their streetscape, but yes, they do want to increase the parking and then also have it in the front. And Doug can probably talk a little bit more about this, but the intention of having the building so that there's no parking in between the building and the rights of way is to have that building addressing the street, because you are at an intersection of 2 key thoroughfares.
Exactly, and you hit it that it is an aesthetic requirement really at its heart is you want to bring the building up to that intersection, have it address the intersection. It's also why there's a requirement to have that front door there. You want to have it pedestrian oriented where you can walk down that sidewalk on the road and be able to relate to that building as pedestrian. And if you have rows of cars in between, it's just separating that pedestrian from the front of the building. So exactly. So you had it. So they're proposing an increase in parking, and then to be able to fit all that parking, they're having to put it in front of the building. So,
okay, thank you.
And then there's another exception here, it looks like as well, under the door situation. Could you explain that a little bit more?
Yes, so the town's design guidelines manual talks about building placement and mixed-use overlay districts where this is located. And it talks about how building entrances must address the major street or intersection corners. And let me pull up the preliminary development plan. Let me pull up a better picture of the preliminary development plan. In this case, they do have their front door so that, it is facing the street, but it's recessed. It's not actually located on the front facade. So it's not, addressing the street or the intersection like the design guidelines talk about. So they're requesting a modification from that to allow the recessed door.
So how do these pedestrians get to that door?
They are proposing a sidewalk connection. So this is a street side trail along Walnut. It's required by the land development ordinance. They're proposing a connection, from that, and you would go up to this door here. And then again, another connection down to Tryon Road.
Any other questions?
I had one or two more prompted by that. So I think there was also a question that came up, and I think you mentioned it, about the surface material for that sidewalk. And I recall there was some discussion about it, concrete versus asphalt. Driving there and taking a look at the property, I noticed everything in that whole area, both sides of the street and quite a bit down Walnut as well, is all concrete sidewalks, sort of traditional. What's motivating the serpentine asphalt type of thing here, which is very unique for quite a bit around any place in this whole district?
The applicant's actually chosen to change the material to concrete since the town council meeting. So the updated preliminary development plan reflects a concrete street side trail.
It's concrete?
Yes.
Okay. And just so that I think I understand what this drawing is showing, could maybe the applicant explain, if I come in on Walnut, how many times do I go around and around this building to get in, get my food, and get back out onto Walnut? Is it 3 times?
It's not 3 times. If you're coming in off of Walnut Street, you would, if you were going to park your car and you were going to leave on Tryon Road, you would circulate once.
Let's assume it's the takeout situation.
Okay. It's similar to what I just said. If you came in off of Walnut, you would circulate the building once, go through the drive-through, and then, yes, you're correct. If you were exiting back to Walnut Street, you would go, that would be 2 times around the building. Correct.
So 1 time in, order my food, come back out, that's twice, and then go back out, it's almost 3 times. Okay, at least twice. And if you come in the other direction, you come in, you can go right in, streamline into the order line, collect that, and then with the easement across the church, you just rotate, you just circulate around the building once.
Yes, sir. Correct.
So that's efficient. So I don't know, it seems like a lot of going around and around the building, but okay, I just wanted to get clarification about that's if I was interpreting it correctly.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions? Steve, did you have something?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Anyone else? 2 questions from me. One, just to make this clarified, the statement of 96 seats, 1 space for every 2 seats, that's an applicant, whatever their business is, that's their requirement, not ours. Ours is 1 space for each 150 square feet of area, and that's that.
That's correct.
Okay, great. The other question I have is I noticed it was mentioned that the drive-through faces Walnut Street. Is that a departure from what we would typically like to see? Would we like to see the drive-through service window facing away from the thoroughfares and the intersection?
I'm going to turn to Doug to see if he can help
Sure.
with that question.
The LDO permits it as long as it's a cantilever awning. The awning can't have supports onto the ground, which typically they don't anyway. So the LDO does allow that. I don't necessarily know, excuse me, from a design standpoint, if that's completely ideal. I would suggest not, but the LDO does allow it.
Okay, yeah. So having that face is not an issue. Okay. That's the only two questions I had. If there are no questions, would someone care to make a motion on this case? Go right ahead, whoever wants to.
All right, I guess I'll be brave. I move that the board forward case 16 REZ 16 to Town Council with a recommendation for approval as is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans and is reasonable in the public interest for the reasons set forth in staff report and presentation. And I'd only add a caveat, and this is based on the assumption of the easement access on the church property as being perpetual and irrevocable, which is what they said.
As a zone, well, was that put out as a zoning condition? I mean, the entire PDP is a zoning condition, but I'm just trying to make sure we're not binding ourselves here.
I'm not sure if the applicant's attorney can answer that, but if it's shown on the PDP as being a perpetual access easement, then they would be bound to that, but I am not familiar enough with the plan to know how it's described.
It's not depicted on the plan as being temporary, so I think the intent is for it to be permanent. Is the understanding
so
of
his
staff?
caveat's
If
proper
that's
then.
incorrect, please correct me.
Okay, so then that caveat's good to keep on there.
Okay.
Is there a second?
I'd be glad to second.
Any discussion? Well, let's start with Victor and take it from there.
I'm pleased that this church will finally be able to recognize the value out of this property, and I know they have an intent to pay off their mortgage, so I hope we're able to help them do that with this. It seems like a good use for the location. It's a tricky, complicated piece of trafficking to make it work, but again, with that easement that is perpetual and irrevocable, you can go in and you can get out, so that's that's my most basic requirement.
I agree with everything Victor said, but this is this has been available for quite some time. I don't really know what else can go here, to really utilize this. Everything in our town involves something with traffic, and I'm sure there'll be some challenges here, and it will be probably well used, but I'm very comfortable that this is probably the best use for this piece of property, and they ought to be allowed to go forward with it.
Any other?
I'm not going to support the motion. I don't usually do this, but it just doesn't feel like the right thing here. This is a wildly busy intersection, and this is a really high-intensity use when you consider in and out traffic, and there's a lot of restrictions on how traffic should move, which we know people are going to try to get around. And, I have to believe that there's something else that you could put here that might not be quite as intense as we want from the plan, but would still serve the purpose. And there were just a lot of things that didn't quite fit. We were looking for more parking. We're putting it, where people can see it. The intersection as it looks today, really, even though it's really busy, it's not unattractive. And I think this is, I'm not against fast food restaurants, use them all the time, but it is an unattractive use for a prominent intersection. And we're not doing anything in this plan to make that better. And we're not doing any traffic mitigations, really, that will, in my opinion, resolve the problems that this is going to bring to that intersection.
Any other comments on this motion on this side? Any more on this side? Well, I encourage people who are going to vote against a motion to speak for the record, so since I intend to vote against it, I will speak my little piece for the record. I agree with Carla in that there are so many tweaks here, we've reached the tipping point of tweaks. The one that gets me is the drive-through is on the outside, so not only is the front door not facing the intersections, not only is it recessed, not only do pedestrians walk past parked cars, but they must walk past the flow line of the drive-through to get to the front door. And that is not something we put in a signature mixed-use area that we're trying to encourage pedestrians, people walking from one place to another, and just being able to use an entire area as mixed-use districts are designed. And it's a signature spot, and if you're approaching our town from that direction, I mean, it's the first thing you see, and it just seems to me to be something that's out of place. And for all the work we're putting into all these plans and all these visions, to have to depart from the intent several times to shoehorn something in just doesn't seem to me to be doing justice to the vision we're trying to put forward. So I'll be voting against that. Does anyone else have anything else on it? If not, would all those in favor of this motion please say aye?
Aye.
All opposed, raise your hand, say no. No. There are... Whoa. Excuse me while I catch my breath. There are 2 noes on this side and 3 noes on this side. Would all those in favor raise their hand and say aye? So now we have 4. The motion fails by 4 to 5.
So if you're so inclined, I would ask you to do another motion so we could just have clarity for the record. And whoever wants to make that motion, if you could be clear about whether you think the proposal is compatible or is not compatible with the comprehensive plan.
So the request would be for a motion to deny on the grounds that it is either compatible and still deny, or that it's not compatible with the plan, and that's the reason. Okay?
So I would make a motion to deny. Let's see. I move that the board forward case number 16 REZ 16 to Town Council with a recommendation for denial as it is not consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans, and denial is reasonable and in the public interest for the reasons set forth in the staff report and presentation.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
So whether something is compliant with the plan or not, I mean, we address that all the time, but I think in this case, just as we were saying, the tweaks to this, some of the policies that it didn't meet, in my mind, sway me toward it not being consistent with the plan. But even if it were, my objections would have remained the same. So, I don't want that to be a technicality that comes back to bite us.
Chuck?
The parking that was inconsistent with our general requirements was a major consideration for me, along with what Carla has stated.
Any other discussion on the motion to deny?
I would only comment, I do struggle with the landowner situation with what sort of a development could occur here on this site, given the constraints that we see. And what the implication of that is denying is that property, which the church owns today, and they've only had, I think, 2 bites over 5 years they've been trying to sell it, means that if we deny that, it's a piece of property that the property owner, church aside, can't utilize, can't realize. So this was very important to them because that piece of property is something that's been a challenge to develop. So I do want to reflect on the property owner situation, that there may not be another opportunity for quite some time.
I respect that point of view, and I think we can be compassionate, but at the same time, I'm more compassionate toward pedestrians. They're going to have to cross in front of cars and between cars, and it is a very awkward situation in terms of that access to the lot. If they didn't have a drive-through, it might change things. Maybe people could get in and out easier, but to me, that's just adding a lot of complication to this whole site and how it's designed to work. It's difficult.
Victor, you make a good point, and I'm aware of that situation in the church, and I'm also aware how that lot came about, because I remember before Walnut Street was even there, when you used to have to go down Jones over to Macedonia, so there was kind of almost an orphan piece. But with that said, I just
there's just too many things about what the applicant is proposing in terms of parking and traffic. It just seems that we're making way too many compromises on what is really kind of a significant piece on that intersection. As that intersection has kind of grown organically, that personally, not that I would be opposed to some other commercial, application for rezoning for commercial, but it's just not that one and not that situation. So.
Anyone else? The only thing I would mention to the comment about the difficulties this puts the property owner in the shape of, in my opinion, I'm here to decide whether or not a use is appropriate. The other fact to that is everybody's property is zoned for something. Right now, somebody can build something everywhere. They're zoned for something. So we are never telling someone you can't build anything on your property. We're just saying that use we don't feel is appropriate. So I take a little different view of denying something. With that in mind, unless there's any other comments, would all those in favor of the motion to deny, as stated by Carla, please say aye. Aye. Raise your hand again if you don't mind. We have the same 5. All those opposed, say no and raise your hand as well.
No.
No. Same 4 no. Thank you very much. That brings that case to a close, and I believe the next things on our agenda are LDO amendments. Yes. Are we doing both of them simultaneously or one then the other?
One then the other.
Okay. Then round 36 is next up.
There will be 2 rounds of amendments that you'll consider tonight. Both of these were discussed at your work session last week. The first is round 36. There are 2 items in this round. The first, item A, relates to the plan approval process in the central transportation zone, which is inside the loop formed by Maynard Road. Currently, Town Council, rather than staff, is the approval authority for development within throughout town that proposes more than 100 residential units, more than 100,000 square feet of non-residential floor area, or a drive-through facility, with the exception of projects where a traffic study has been, or rezoning has been performed within the previous 2 years. For these items that go to Town Council, it's an evidentiary public hearing is required. And this is a process that was adopted after repeal of the town's road ordinance in 2013. And the purpose of this was to ensure that traffic impacts could be considered for uses where high trip generation was expected. The proposed amendment would allow staff approval of these projects within this zone inside the Maynard Loop, which is shown in the green area. And it would also allow staff approval townwide for drive-through facilities for uses other than restaurants. Right now, we don't have that distinction, and the other types of drive-throughs really don't have the intensity of the traffic generation. At the public hearing, some council members, in considering this proposal, expressed some concern with losing the ability to review large development projects in certain areas. But there were no other speakers at the public hearing. Just a couple of points. This change does support several policies of the Cary Community Plan that are related to development, redevelopment, infill, particularly in the town center, by streamlining the development plan approval process and being more developer-friendly. We think this is particularly important in the town center, where the town has made significant investments in redeveloping the downtown area and trying to encourage development to support that investment that we have made. Also, I would note that the lower transportation fees and level of service standards that have been adopted within this area that's proposed a central transportation zone were put in place some time ago in the land development ordinance for the purpose of encouraging redevelopment and infill, and also recognizing that within this more centralized portion of Cary, the road network is largely built out, so that even if there are traffic studies done and mitigations recommended, in most cases that's not going to be feasible, and also acknowledges that higher levels of traffic congestion are generally acceptable and expected when you get into more of a downtown type area. The other point I'd like to make is that between the town center area and the Maynard, the full extent of the Maynard Loop, most of that area is built out. The most significant area that we think for that could be ripe in coming years for potential redevelopment is Mayfair Plaza. Other shopping centers in this area, too, are in mixed-use overlay districts or destination center shopping centers where any redevelopment that would be with a mix of uses would require rezoning to a district that would include a preliminary development plan. So in most of those cases, we feel that this board and council would have the opportunity to look at that development through a preliminary development plan at the time of the rezoning, even in the absence of the evidentiary hearing. The second item in this round concerns right-of-way dedication and existing dwellings. With this change, existing dwellings could be deemed conforming if right-of-way dedication for widening an existing road consistent with their transportation plan caused building setbacks to be made non-conforming. And this change would remove a disincentive for property owners to voluntarily dedicate right-of-way in instances when the town could not require it. So we're recommending that change. That concludes staff's comments. We'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. And of course, this was something we'd also discussed in one of our work sessions, so there may or may not be too many questions. Does anyone?
Work session.
Does any? Oh, so if you have a few questions,
I
right
just
ahead.
have.
Sure.
I just want to ask one thing. Can you think of any examples where someone has gone through this review process? You know, they've had one of these larger developments where the council made some significant beneficial change to it. I'm trying to wrap my head around exactly what it is we might lose with this. And I apologize. I should have asked you this before the meeting so you'd have a chance to prepare.
I don't have an example off the top of my head of a specific development. I think, I don't know if any other staff members do. I think generally those items are consistent with typically I think there aren't significant changes, but occasionally there are. And I'm not sure if you we don't have a specific example right now. Okay. But I would say that for the most part there aren't significant changes made. Is that?
Of the handful of quasi-judicial cases I've had for drive-throughs, council presented little, if any, concern, and there's been very little, if any, changes to the plans that have come before them in the 2 years I've been here. That's 5 or 6 plans, maybe.
Okay.
Including some that I've observed but hadn't presented.
That's it.
Any other questions over here? To my right? Would someone care to make a motion on round 36?
I'll make a motion. I move that the board forward LDO amendment round 36 to town council with a recommendation for approval, as it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans and is reasonable and in the public interest for the reasons set forth in the staff report and presentation.
Second, please.
Second.
Any discussion from that, Brian?
Yeah, I don't think there's too much to say about this, but I did want to talk about item B. I really like the inclusion of that in here, and I hope that that will encourage more voluntary dedication of right-of-way. and the property owners won't have to worry about the existing structures not being non-conforming. And I think we actually had a case recently that this might have been helpful in. So I'm definitely excited about having that in there.
Thank you.
I'll second that, particularly on item B, because we have had some cases where that seems to be something that comes up, and there'll be a good tool having in the toolbox going forward.
Any other discussion on round 36?
I do recall the conversation the council had, and we just had a little bit of it as well, with regard to what do we lose with regard to, item A and changing how things in that internal area. Well, the motivation for that cutoff was, in the past, was based on transportation and traffic and so forth, and transportation infrastructure, which still makes sense, still would apply to every place else in Cary. But in that internal area, that's a done discussion. There really isn't an opportunity to do that. So all we're doing is leaving an impediment or an opportunity, a road bump that for a developer who wants to do something downtown, this would help. So I don't see any takeaway, because there's not much to say about traffic. So let's get the development going and encourage that to move. So that's all an upside. I don't think we lose anything. And as you made the good point, if there were to be a rezoning situation, well, then we would go through the regular old rezoning process and public hearing and blah, 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 blah. And Mayfair, as you point out, may likely, if it ever were to be something, it most likely would develop to take advantage of a rezoning potential as opposed to status quo. So I think there's no lose on this situation.
Anything else? Then would all those in favor of the motion to approve round 36, please say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Say no. That motion is unanimously carried. We are now on to round 38.
There are 3 items in round 38. The first deals with residential garages. In 2012, there was an LDO amendment that prohibited construction of new detached buildings, such as a garage located between the dwelling and the street. This is a photograph showing an example of this, where a garage is located in the front yard and can have the appearance of a dominating feature. The intent of this amendment back in 2012 was to preserve the look and the feel of neighborhoods, particularly where you have relatively small lots and homes close together. This is an example in that particular situation where you can see most of the homes are set back a certain distance, and then the garage structure in the front that just created a change in that neighborhood. We had a situation in last year where a property owner requested to build a detached garage on a much larger parcel that was over 3.5 acres on a lot that was zoned R40. The setback of the existing residence on that lot was about 180 feet, and the property owner proposed to build a garage that would have been about 120 feet back, but would have been between the street and the house, so therefore that wasn't permitted at the time. This is an aerial view showing that particular situation. This is on Lake Drive in the western portion of Cary beyond Maynard Road. In this case, most of this area is R40. Some of the surrounding areas are 20, and then a few smaller lots to the rear, but the neighborhood is a completely different scale and character. The proposed amendment would allow accessory buildings to be built in the front of a home where the lot size was at least 40,000 square feet, and the accessory building was set back at least 100 feet from the street right-of-way. These numbers are somewhat arbitrary. However, it's in an exact number is not as much of a concern as trying to maintain the intent of that original amendment. So we felt like this was a good balance to create some flexibility for the larger lots while maintaining that intent. But certainly the number, the 100-foot number could vary if it was felt that that number wasn't correct, and this was staff's recommendation for the best fit. There were no concerns with this item expressed at the public hearing, though the property owner triggering the amendment did speak in favor. The second item in this round deals with neighborhood meetings for rezoning cases, and it proposes an alternate means of public outreach for widespread rezoning cases that aren't related to the development of a specific parcel. And this is proposed in anticipation of changes that we may need to zoning districts or overlay districts in the future to implement the Cary Community Plan. A couple of things to point out with this. The initial proposal, when this was presented at public hearing, was worded to exempt town-initiated rezonings from the neighborhood meeting requirement, a very simple text change. In response to some of the concerns from council members at the public hearing, the proposal was revised to replace rather than eliminate the neighborhood meeting requirement, and so that we would continue the public outreach input opportunities between submittal or prior to a public hearing. The format of those meetings would be based on the nature and the scope of the proposed change. So we would look at that on a case-by-case basis to make sure that however we notified people would be or the format of the meeting would be appropriate to the number of people expected, the location, and that sort of thing. Also, we would propose to specify that notification of citizens would be done through a half-page ad in a local newspaper or in a individual letters to affected property owners. So that just gives us an alternate means of notification in the event that it's a very large rezoning that could touch potentially thousands of parcels. And finally, item C includes some minor changes that would clarify some existing buffer requirements, eliminate the setback requirement for walkways on single-family lots. We are proposing to require the submittal of new or revised zoning conditions for rezoning cases so that they're submitted at least 20 business days prior to a council or planning and zoning board meeting at which they're to be presented, so that we can have time to write the staff report and have those conditions vetted through staff and then explained in your staff reports. And also an item to allow a crematorium as a permitted use in an industrial district. Currently, that use is allowed in office and institutional and general commercial and mixed-use overlay districts, but to provide a little more flexibility for that use. And that concludes staff's comments on those items, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions on round 38?
I have one on item B. I'm trying to, I want to make sure that people whose property is affected by some type of rezoning, even if it's a large one, I noticed that we said we'd put out a half-page ad in the newspaper or send letters. I really think that if someone's property is involved in a rezoning or, some type of change, transportation change, anything that's going to affect them, that they should receive a letter from the town. It really shouldn't be up to people to, keep up with the website, make sure they get that newspaper, right? So I'm trying to understand exactly where this kicks in. How big of a rezoning are we talking about?
For any zoning that's just an individual parcel or any citizen-initiated zoning, we would do the standard notification. So for townwide rezonings, the statutory requirements are different, that you don't have to notify all owners of adjacent property and that sort of thing. So we're taking advantage of the statutory flexibility on townwide rezonings to not have to notify folks.
Well, I'm not talking about adjacent property owners. I'm talking about the property owner themselves. So you're saying you don't have to notify, you can rezone someone's property. And we're just talking about rezoning or any other comprehensive plan changes?
Rezonings.
Rezonings.
The rezoning is the only thing that requires a neighborhood meeting. A comprehensive plan amendment doesn't require that. So what we're talking about is giving notice and having a neighborhood meeting. We're not talking about the notice for the rezoning itself, but we're talking about having a neighborhood meeting and who we send a letter to. Right now, we send a letter to everyone within 800 feet
yes.
of
Okay,
the
so
property.
you'd still get a letter that something was happening to your property. This is simply how you get invited to the meeting.
Or whether to have a neighborhood meeting at all.
We have currently, for any rezoning case, we have a neighborhood meeting that's held here in Town Hall. And all of the applicants for rezoning cases submitted in that month come to the meeting, and then we break out into smaller rooms.
Right, I've been to many of those.
So we do. So when we have more widespread rezoning cases, right now the ordinance requires us to have that neighborhood meeting in that format as well. So we're making a change to give ourselves flexibility.
Gotcha.
So the public hearing process and the public hearing notification is the same as currently required.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? This doesn't really count as a question, but I just want to let you know that regarding the neighborhood meetings that happen here, all the feedback I've ever gotten from people who've attended those, they just love the fact that it's held here and the town walks them through how rezoning goes as opposed to having a developer-driven meeting somewhere else. And it's been in my mind, it's been a great success. So that's a really great thing. Any other questions at all? If not, do we have a motion on 38?
I'll move that the board forward LDO amendment round 38 to Town Council with a recommendation for approval as it is consistent with the comprehensive plan and all other applicable plans and is reasonable and in the public interest for the reasons set forth in the staff report and presentation.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
Anything to add, Dan?
All good stuff. And it's 8:30.
Any other discussion on that? Mary Jo? Anything else? No?
I don't have anything.
Oh, wow. All right, then all those in favor of 38, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. That motion carries unanimously. And I believe we're at the end of this meeting. And also, let's see, yes, we are. We're also at the end of a very, very high-achieving tenure of my colleague to my right, Mona Harris-Best, who will be leaving us this board after this evening. And I'm sorry to see you go. I got to say, you've been on this board as long as I've been on the board. You've been here, and I've got to say you've been a really valued member. And from a personal standpoint, thank you very much for being vice chair for these past 2 years. You've been a friend of this board and a friend to me, and I'm really sorry to see you go.
Thank you. It's been fun. And I appreciate it. Mixed emotions, but yeah, it's a good move personally.
Well, we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Had so much fun. Staff is fabulous.
Well, there's only one thing to do. Anyone?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you and good evening.
This has been a production of Cary TV. Visit the Town of Cary's website at townofcary.org.